I stared from the doorway of our bedroom sorrowful as Kevin packed his briefcase. The tension between us seemed to be strangled by our relationship, which was like a heavy fog that had engulfed our once happy home. "I can't believe you're doing this," I added, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. Kevin looked up, his eyes cold. "I'm going to the office, Amelia. Someone is needed to keep this family running." His motivations were painful and deeply felt, serving as a sharp reminder of the decision I had made just days earlier. "You know that's not fair," I replied as I re-entered the room. In response, simmering in my chest was anger. I quit my job for us, for our family. His actions betrayed his frustration as he snapped his briefcase shut. "No, you left your work because the strain was too much for you to bear. You now want me to take up the slack." At what he said, I winced. They made a big impression. It was true that I had been finding it difficult to get used to being a stay-at-home mother. However, I never anticipated Kevin's level of hatred. I responded, "I'm trying, Kevin." My voice quivered with passion. "It's not easy to give up a career I loved." With a heavy sigh, he ran a hand over his hair. "I'm not looking for a fight this evening. We have some serious business to discuss." The sound of little feet splattering down the hallway stopped us before we could say anything more. With her teddy bear fiercely clasped to her bosom and her golden locks ruffled, our daughter, Harriet, emerged from the doorway. She questioned naively, "Mommy, Daddy, why are you fighting?" I knelt to her level and feigned a grin. "Dear, we're not fighting just now. Daddy and I were chatting." Harriet was scooped up by Kevin, who then kissed her forehead. "Your mom is correct, Princess. Everything is all right. How about you go look for Grandma? She's probably preparing pancakes." I felt a tinge of regret as Harriet ran off. How many times had small ears heard our arguments? Kevin put down his suitcase, and his face softened a little. "All right, tonight we'll discuss. I have a suggestion that might help us get back on course." I simply nodded, not believing I could say anything. I had the unshakable impression that something was very wrong in our family, between us. As he was leaving for work, I was nervous about the conversation we would be having that evening and what it would mean for our future. Because of the nagging doubt, dull chores, and my in-laws' constant chatting, the day dragged on. I was uncomfortable and hungry, waiting for the adult talk to finish that didn't revolve around gossip or grandkids. By the time Kevin got back home with the kids, well, sleeping, we retired to the study after supper. Breaking the quiet, Kevin leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He started off by saying, "I've been thinking about how we can tackle some of our challenges." I arched an eyebrow. With a little smile on his lips, he nodded. "What if we buy my parents a house with some of our savings? They could get closer, assist with the kids more, and take up a lot of the burden for the two of us." I sensed the room's air disappearing, our reserves. I questioned the funds we set aside for our future, the college funds for the kids. Kevin stopped smiling. "I assumed you would be pleased with this. It offers a lot of solutions for our issues." I raised my voice and reverberated, "Or the issues with your parents." With a look of annoyance on his face, Kevin stood up. "Why do you make things so hard for me? It's the best course of action for our family." I watched in disbelief as he stormed out. Was anything like this actually taking place? Had my spouse suddenly proposed, without my consent, to spend our life savings to purchase a home for his parents? Feeling more alone than ever, I buried my face in my hands. What was going to happen to me? And more importantly, how had we arrived at this point? I heard quiet sounds coming from the kitchen the following morning, which I assumed to be those of Kevin and his mother. I walked down the corridor, being cautious not to trip on the noisy floorboard next to the stairs. "Mom, she's being unreasonable," Kevin said in a clear voice. I assumed she would be pleased with this. His mother gave a kind but clear response. "Oh my goodness, some ladies simply cannot bear the demands of raising a family. Not every person is suited for it." I bit my lip as hurt and rage battled within me. Is that how people understood me? That I was unable to manage it? "Perhaps if we just move forward with the plans," Kevin said, "she might change her mind." Really, it's for the best. I had had enough. Not bothering to hide, I stormed into the kitchen. Kevin, for whom is the best? With remorse lighting over their cheeks, they both sprang first to recover. Kevin's mother put on a cheesy smile. "Good morning, my love. How was your night's sleep?" Disregarding her, I concentrated on my husband. "Were you going to talk behind my back about this? Or were you going to discuss it with me at all?" Even Kevin seemed a little embarrassed. "Amelia, that isn't how it is. We were only talking." I interrupted him. "Talking about making big financial decisions without me. About the future, ours and our children's." His mother intervened, always the mediator. "Let's not get too fired up just yet. Would you mind if I took the kids to the park so you two could have some alone time?" She was yelling for Harriet and Jason as she hurried out of the kitchen before I could object. There was a sharp stillness between Kevin and me when the front door closed. "You cannot continue doing this," I murmured quietly. "You cannot continue to exclude me from decisions that impact our family." Kevin let out a sigh and ran his fingers through his hair. "Amelia, I'm not shoving you out. I'm searching for answers." "Kevin, you've been the one who's been distant," I snapped. "You've been acting like a failure ever since you persuaded me to quit my job, because you said I needed to focus on the family," I reasoned. I moved away from him as he grabbed me. "That is incorrect. Simply put, I believed that doing this would simplify things. Parents might assist with the children. You'd receive more assistance." "More assistance?" I gave a sour laugh. "Your father hardly recognizes me, and your mother can hardly contain her hatred for me." Kevin grew stern-faced. "That is unfair. They have been really supportive since you left your work." "Supportive?" I sneered. "They have been choked. You want to spend our money to buy them a house, but I can't make a single choice about our kids without your mother questioning me." He raised his palms. "What else should we do with it? We could use the assistance since it is currently available." I looked into his eyes and saw him clearly for the first time in many months. This man was not the one I wed. This was someone else entirely. "Kevin, I can't handle this anymore," I said. I refused to be excluded within my own family. His face became more composed. "Come on, Amelia. We can resolve this. We just have to." He was cut off by the sound of the front door opening, followed by the enthusiastic chatter of our children filling the house, accompanied by the voices of his parents. "Daddy, Mommy," Harriet yelled. "See what we found at the park." I forced a grin as our daughter ran into the kitchen, brandishing a glittering pebble. But above her head, I saw Kevin's mother's rough glance. She was certain she had won this round. As I bent down to gaze at Harriet's treasure, I silently vowed that this wasn't the end. I wouldn't allow them to drive me away from my own family. Something needed to shift quickly. Staring at the laptop screen in front of me, I sat at the kitchen table, watching emails and messages scroll by, each one a glimmer of the life I'd left behind. My fingers ached to write a resume, to go back to practicing law, where I had once been successful. The sound of Kevin's car pulling into the driveway pulled me back to reality. I shut the laptop quickly, guilt washing over me. How did I get here? Hadn't I promised my family this life? Kevin came in, his face lighting up as he saw me. There you are. Hello. I was thinking we could take the kids out to dinner today. What do you think? I faked a laugh. That sounds fantastic. Where are the children? He answered, Mom took them to the mall for fresh school clothes. My lips twisted into a forced grin. Did she now? I thought we agreed to do that together this weekend. Without noticing my dismay, Kevin shrugged. Mom offered. I thought you'd appreciate a break. A break? As if I needed to get away from my own children. Trying to swallow my hurt, I said, Kevin, we need to talk about your parents, about this whole situation. His shoulders stiffened as he groaned. Not this again, Amelia. I thought we'd moved past this. Past what? I shot back. Me having a say in decisions for our family. I got up, feeling my rage boiling over. Kevin, you can't keep making decisions on your own, especially about our savings. He narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath. Earlier, I heard you on the phone with a real estate agent, right? Kevin looked surprised, then flushed. It was only a preliminary discussion. I was gathering information. Without speaking to me first, I finished for him. He raked a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. Amelia, what do you want from me? I'm trying to act in our family's best interests. Our family, I repeated. Not your parents' ideal version of it. Our family, Kevin, me, you, and the children. He shot back. My parents are part of our family too. Why can't you see that? Something inside me snapped. Because they're taking control. Your father ignores me during dinners. Your mother criticizes my parenting. And you're allowing it to happen. Kevin grew stern. That's unfair. They only want to help. I chuckled in disbelief. Help? Is that what you call it when your mother insults my parenting and your father avoids me at dinners? Kevin replied, You're exaggerating. But I could see a hint of doubt in his eyes. I stepped closer and spoke softly. Kevin, am I wrong? When was the last time your parents weren't involved in a decision that we made together? He opened his mouth, then shut it, unable to respond. That's what I thought. My strength began to fade. Kevin, I can't live like this. Something has to change. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of the kind, thoughtful man I'd married, but he quickly hardened again. You're right. Something does have to change. You need to accept that this is how things are now, Amelia. My parents are here to stay. We'll all be happier if you just embrace that sooner rather than later. Filled with shock and sadness, I looked at him. Was this truly the state of our marriage? The sound of the front door opening and our kids' excited chatter was followed by Kevin's mother's voice calling, We're back. Wait until you see what we bought. Kevin turned to greet them, throwing me a look that made it clear our conversation was over. Standing there, reality overwhelmed me. This wasn't just about Kevin's parents. It was about our marriage's future. For the first time, I wasn't sure if it had one. That night, I sat in our study, pen poised over paper, heart pounding in the odd quiet of the room. This was it, the breaking point. I glanced at my watch. It was 2:37 a.m., and Kevin was oblivious that our world was about to shake. The kids were safely asleep, unaware of the turmoil that had built over the past months. My hand trembled as I began to write. The kids and I will be gone by the time you read this, Kevin. This is no longer how I can live. my vision blurred as years of grief, disappointment, and betrayal spilled onto the paper. I wrote about feeling ignored, about his parents' constant interference, and about the dreams I'd given up, only to feel like a stranger in my own home. I stifled a sob, not wanting to wake anyone. This wasn't the life we planned, and it wasn't what I'd envisioned. But life happens, people change, and sometimes you have to be brave enough to write your own narrative. I folded the letter carefully and left it in the center of his desk. Quietly, I made my way upstairs and gently shook Harriet awake. She murmured sleepily, "What's wrong?" I whispered, "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. We're just going on a little trip. Could you help with your brother like a big girl?" Though still drowsy, she nodded. Jason, always a light sleeper, was easy to wake. Within minutes, they were dressed and ready, clutching their stuffed animals. Holding my breath as we tiptoed down the stairs, I listened to Kevin's steady snoring from our bedroom, a sound that was oddly comforting yet deeply painful. Outside, as I strapped the children into their seats, Harriet's small voice cut through the quiet night. "Mommy, where's Daddy? Isn't he coming?" The question hit hard. I forced a gentle smile. "No, sweetie. Daddy has to stay here, but we'll see him soon." Even though the lie stung, I couldn't shatter their reality. Not yet. Sliding into the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of movement. Kevin's mother was watching from an upstairs window. Our eyes met, and time seemed to stop. I saw the beginning of comprehension, a spark of wrath, and then, shockingly, something that nearly seemed like satisfaction. I fired the engine and slid out of the driveway. Without thinking, I drove through the lonely dark streets, my palms shaking on the steering wheel. To what destination were we heading? How would we proceed? My head was filled with questions that felt as if they would never end. However, I felt calmer when I looked at my sleeping kids in the rearview mirror. We would work things out. It was necessary for us to. Just as the first rays of dawn began to strike the sky, my phone buzzed. My blood ran cold as I saw Kevin's name flash on the screen with a message. Asterisk, you have no right to remove my kids. My attorney will get back to you. Amelia, you're not going to get away with this. Asterisk, my resolve strengthened, and I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Now there was no turning back. I would confront the next challenge, and any upcoming struggles for the sake of my children and myself. A tiny grin crept onto my face as the sun rose, casting a picture of opportunity and optimism over the earth. This was only the start of a new chapter in our narrative, not its conclusion. I arrived at a dilapidated motel parking lot, fatigue filling my body. Despite the mess in our lives, the children's faces were serene as they slept soundly in the back seat. I was about to cry as I propped my head on the steering wheel when I heard a tap on the window. "Amelia, is that you?" Blinking in shock, I looked up. My high school best friend, Jasmine, was there, gazing through the glass, a face I hadn't seen in a long time. "Jasmine?" I gasped, hastily wiping my eyes and getting out of the car. "What are you doing here?" She drew me into a close embrace. "This place is managed by me. But forget about that. What's happening? Are you all right?" Something inside me shattered at the concern in her voice. Before I knew it, I was crying in her arms and telling her the entire tale in broken breaths. With each phrase, Jasmine's expression grew more serious. When I finished, she gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You're not staying in this hole. Come on, I'll give you my extra room." After an hour, the kids were nestled into cozy beds, and I sat at Jasmine's kitchen table, sipping a warm cup of tea. "So, what's your plan?" Jasmine asked gently. Feeling confused, I gazed into my tea. "I'm not sure. I just couldn't stay there any longer. But I can see from Kevin's text that he's going to fight for the kids." Jasmine's eyes turned steely. "Then you fight back, Amelia. You've always been the sharpest person I know. You're capable of doing this." "I don't even have an attorney," I admitted, as the reality of my position hit me. A smirk appeared on Jasmine's face. "To be honest, I think I can help with that. Remember Stephen from high school?" My heart skipped a beat. Stephen had been the boy I secretly admired for years. "What about him?" "He's a divorce lawyer now, one of the best in the state," Jasmine said. She paused, then added, "And he always had a thing for you." My cheeks flushed, and then I felt guilty. Here I was, blushing over a crush from high school while leaving my spouse. "Jasmine, I can't afford a top-tier attorney," I said. "Let me talk to him. Just meet with him. Please for me." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again with another text from Kevin. Asterisk, "My folks are worried. How could you harm our family like this? You'll never see the kids again if you don't come home immediately." Asterisk, shaking, I handed the message to Jasmine, whose expression grew serious. "That settles it. Stephen is the first person I'm calling in the morning." That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. My mind was plagued with the sensation of being on a precipice. Meeting with Stephen seemed like the end of the road, the official conclusion of my marriage. Yet, as I reflected on Kevin's cold demeanor and his family's oppressive influence, I realized my marriage had ended long ago. I just hadn't had the courage to admit it. The following morning, I awoke to Jasmine's voice in the hallway. "Yes, Stephen, she can meet you at 2 p.m. Thank you." She turned to me, her expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Amelia, Stephen agreed to meet with you today." My heart pounded. This was the turning point for me and my children. "Great," I said, surprised by the strength of my own voice. Hugging my drowsy kids, I got ready for the day. As I did, hope ignited in me, something I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt alone. I was ready to fight for the life we deserved. When I arrived at Stephen's office, I smoothed down my shirt, trying to control my nerves. He had changed from the shy boy I remembered. When he walked in, Stephen extended his hand, a comforting look on his face. "It's been too long, Amelia. I'm sorry we're meeting like this." A familiar flutter rose in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. This was about my children's future. Stephen listened intently as I described my situation, his brow furrowing with each new detail. When I finished, he leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I won't sugarcoat this, Amelia. This could get ugly, especially with Kevin's family involved. But I promise we'll fight to the end." His words ignited a spark within me, a fire I thought had long since gone out. "How do we start?" For the next hour, we discussed our strategy, and as Stephen laid out the plan, my old legal instincts returned. Just as we were about to finish, my phone buzzed. Seeing Kevin's name, I quickly excused myself to answer. "Where are you, Amelia?" Kevin's voice was cold and controlled. "My parents are devastated. Bring the children home now." Taking a steadying breath, I replied, "No, Kevin, I'm not coming back. I've hired an attorney. Please contact him for any further matters." A brief silence followed, and then Kevin's voice turned venomous. "You really think you can take my kids and get away with it? I'm going to ruin you, Amelia. You'll be lucky if you see them again when I'm done." The call ended. Stephen put a comforting hand on my shoulder as I stood there shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked, his expression filled with concern. I nodded, wiping away tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. "Stephen," he threatened to take the kids. "What if?" He placed his hands firmly on my shoulders. "We won't let that happen, Amelia. You're not alone in this, and you're stronger than you realize." Overcome with emotion, I stared into his eyes, feeling a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something else I couldn't quite name. I took a step back, composing myself. "What's our next move?" "We need to file for temporary custody immediately," he said, his face serious. "And we need to discuss your career." My eyes widened. "My career?" But I gave that up. "Yes," he replied sternly. "And that will be used against us in court. We need to show that you can provide for the kids on your own." The reality hit me like a blow. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now that sacrifice could cost me my children. Feeling uncertain, I murmured, I don't know if I can go back." Stephen's gaze hardened with determination. The Amelia I knew in high school could accomplish anything. "She's still in there. You just need to find her again." As I left Stephen's office that day, my head spun with the weight of what lay ahead. Rebuilding my career, battling Kevin and his family, and keeping my children safe. It seemed impossible, yet for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. That night, as I tucked my daughter Harriet into bed, she looked at me with her big, curious eyes. "When are we going home, Mama?" My heart tightened. I pulled her close and whispered, "We are home, sweetheart. Home is wherever we are together." I vowed in silence as I held my daughter that I would build us a new home, one that was full of love, respect, and free from hardship. No matter how long it took or how fierce the battle was, I was prepared for the difficult path ahead. The old Amelia was coming to her senses and ready to reclaim her life. In front of me stood the courtroom, a towering reminder of the conflict I was about to engage in. Grasping my suitcase firmly, I attempted to calm my anxiety. Our interim custody court hearing was today, and I knew that Kevin and his parents would make a big deal out of it. Stephen touched my shoulder kindly. "You can succeed, Amelia. Keep in mind all we've planned." I nodded, and as we stepped into the building, I took a deep breath. I saw Kevin, his parents, and their attorney huddled together, and my fury boiled at my mother-in-law's nasty expression. When the hearing started, I watched in growing terror as Kevin's attorney presented me as an unstable, careless mother who had deserted her family on a whim. They even brought up my choice to resign from my job, misrepresenting it as proof that I couldn't support my kids. Stephen expertly made our case when it was our turn, emphasizing my years of successful legal career and my commitment to my children. However, I noticed the judge's doubtful look, and uncertainty tore at me. Had I made a grave error? During our recess, I overheard Kevin's mother talking loudly in the hallway. Naturally, as soon as we gain custody, we'll be moving in to help with the kids, rather than leaving them with some unstable mother who can't decide what she wants out of life. They need a secure environment. A part of me broke. I marched up to her before I had a chance to think. "How could you?" I growled. "From the beginning, you have been attempting to push me away. But guess what? I'm done being treated unfairly. I will use every ounce of my strength to fight you for those children." Kevin's father moved to separate us. "Amelia, you're going insane right now. You're proving that you're unfit to be a parent." As I turned, I saw Jasmine's fiery gaze as she touched my arm, telling my in-laws, "Remove yourselves. You are no longer allowed to harass her. Stephen arrived, gently pulling me away from the gathering crowd. This isn't helping us, Amelia. We must stay focused on the hearing. But the damage had already been done. When we re-entered the courtroom, I felt the judge's critical stare. My outburst had given Kevin the upper hand. Given the evidence submitted and the recent incident in the hallway, I'm inclined to grant temporary custody to the father, with supervised visits for the mother, the judge said, clearing his throat. The whole world felt as if it tilted. My breathing stopped. This couldn't be happening. Stephen immediately requested a break, and the judge reluctantly agreed. I followed Stephen to a private conference room, feeling dazed. Amelia, pay attention to me, Stephen pleaded. We still have work to do, but we need to adjust our strategy. You have to demonstrate that you're a responsible, stable parent who prioritizes her kids. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I nodded silently. But Stephen, how am I supposed to let them take my babies? I can't let them go. He gripped my shoulders fiercely. I need you to pull yourself together because we are going to fight this. I know the Amelia who never gives up, who refuses to be bullied by anyone. Where's that Amelia? His words sparked a purpose within me. Straightening, I wiped my tears. She's here, and she's ready for battle. As we walked back into the courtroom, I saw Kevin and his parents, their smug expressions strengthening my resolve. This was no longer just about me. It was about showing my kids what it meant to stand up for oneself and break free from others' control. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders. The conflict wasn't over. It was just beginning. With my pulse racing, I watched the judge prepare to announce his decision. It had taken months of struggle, sleepless nights, and relentless determination to get here. Seated across from me were Kevin and his parents, their expressions a mix of hatred and smug confidence. The judge's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. This court has carefully considered all presented evidence in the matter of custody for Jason and Harriet. Feeling Stephen's comforting presence beside me, I held my breath. The world seemed to stop as the judge announced that Amelia Matthews would receive primary custody with significant visitation rights for Kevin Matthews. As the court discussed the specifics, relief and vindication washed over me. I heard Kevin's mother gasp and saw Kevin's face fall in shock. Stephen looked at me, his contagious smile lifting my spirits even more and making my heart skip a beat. Outside the courthouse, Kevin approached me, his parents watching from a distance. Amelia, I'm sorry for everything, he murmured. I nodded, surprised that I didn't feel anger anymore. I apologize too, Kevin, but this is best for all of us. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as they left. I had not only won the custody battle, but also my independence. Jasmine rushed over and hugged me tightly. You did it, girl. I knew you could. I laughed until tears of joy streamed down my cheeks. Jasmine, I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me hope when I had none. You saved me. She squeezed my hand. That's what friends are for. Now go celebrate with your kids, and maybe a certain handsome lawyer. Later that evening, after a joyful reunion with Harriet and Jason, I sat on Jasmine's porch, watching the sunset. Stephen joined me, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one and said, "To new beginnings." I smiled, gently tapping my glass to his. "To fresh starts." After a comfortable silence, he said, "You know, Amelia, from what I've seen these past few months, you're amazing. I see how you've changed, the way you fought for yourself and your kids." I nodded, pride swelling within me. I'm not different. I just discovered parts of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Stephen reached out, his touch sparking something within me. Maybe we could have dinner sometime, just the two of us, now that the dust has settled. As I looked into his eyes, warmth and admiration glowed there, and I felt the possibility of more. For a moment, old doubts crept in, but I remembered all I'd accomplished and overcome. Yes, I'd like that, I whispered. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the hardships, the hopeless moments, the pain that had forged my strength. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues, I realized that everything had led me here. I had reclaimed my strength, my freedom, and a support network I hadn't known I needed. I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time, despite the uncertainty of the future. My children, my independence, and maybe a loving future were all still in my future. This was the beginning, not just the finish. I was determined to relish every bit of my fresh start as I sipped my wine and felt Stephen's warm hand in mine.